The third-generation Renault Megane was equipped with many different engines, ranging from 1.2-liter turbo engines to the 275-horsepower 2.0 turbo for the RS version. The range of diesel engines includes 4 units, 1.5 to 2.0 liters, 1.6 K4M 106 horsepower. Petrol Meganes are available with 1.6-liter naturally aspirated engines. First of all, we are talking about the Renault K4M engine. This is a simple and resourceful engine, with a timing belt that needs to be changed every 120,000 kilometers. The valve drive has hydraulic compensators. On the Megane, this motor is equipped with one-phase shifter. On almost all cars, the K4M engine is heavily covered in dirt, which sticks to the oil oozing from it. It appears from above from under the phase shifter control valve, from under the plugs at the back of the cylinder head, and also appears through the sealant that seals the light alloyed valve cover. Oil also appears on the crankshaft seals, but the manufacturer helped solve this problem by releasing updated Teflon seals. But they need to be installed dry, and not in the old-fashioned way, lubricated with oil. Then leaks along the crankshaft will not bother you for a long time. The service also had to change the oil pump drive gear. After installing the new type of gear, repeated oil leaks along the front oil seal stopped. We have a detailed review of the K4M motor, which contains a lot of interesting information about other seals of this motor and its minor problems. 1.6 H4M 115 horsepower. Later, a new 1.6-liter engine appeared on the Megane, under the designation H4M. This engine was also installed on Nissans under the designation HR16. This engine has a timing chain drive, but there are no hydraulic compensators in the valve drive. The Megane was equipped with a version of this engine with 2-phase shifters and a double set of fuel injectors. There are 8 of them, but the injection is distributed. This is a more interesting engine. It has fewer troublesome diseases. You just shouldn't skimp on engine oil. You need to listen to the chain after a mileage of 200,000 kilometers. And adjusting valves by selecting pushers is especially important for machines equipped with non-standard gas equipment. 2.0 F4R 180 to 275 horsepower. The third-generation Megane received the 2-liter F4R engine from Renault only in a turbocharged version, and it's a decent engine. We will not dwell on it in detail now, because it is rare. In the description you will find a detailed overview of this motor. 2.0 M4R 140 horsepower. Much more often on the third-generation Meganes you can find the Nissan 2-liter naturally aspirated M4R. Essentially, this is an enlarged H4M with a timing chain and the absence of hydraulic compensators. This engine will be harmed by saving on engine oil, which will cause oil burn. An unqualified replacement of spark plugs can result in thread failure. 1.2 Terrace H5F 115 horsepower. 1.4 Terrace H4J 130 horsepower. Since 2012, in Europe, Renault began converting its cars to new turbo engines with a displacement of 1.2 and 1.4 liters. These are different engines. They do not have hydraulic compensators. Timing chains last just over 120,000 kilometers. Both engines are prone to serious oil burns, especially if you overrun the oil a little. The 1.2-liter engine has direct injection, and the 1.4-liter engine has distributed injection. The most common turbodiesel under the hood of the third Megane is the K9 K1.5. This is a good engine, and now in all its versions. That is, both with the early Delphi fuel system and the late Continental. We have a detailed review of this turbodiesel. Let us add that even the particulate filter and dual-mass flywheel, which were included in its most powerful modifications, can last up to 300,000 kilometers. Some owners still change the connecting rod bearings of this engine to ensure they don't turn. This will not happen if you change the oil every 10,000 kilometers and do not allow it to be diluted by diesel fuel during frequent attempts to burn through the particulate filter. 1.9 DC F9Q 130 horsepower. 1.6 DC R9M 130 horsepower. 2.0 DC M9R 150 to 160 horsepower. In nature, there are third-generation Megane with the old 1.9 DC engine, F9Q, and with newer brother engines 1.6 DC and 2.0 DC. If you come across one, don't doubt their reliability. Let's talk about manual transmissions for Renault Megane. Mated to less powerful engines, both petrol and diesel, is a 5-speed JR5 gearbox. Sometimes you come across a JH3 with a K4M engine. These transmissions began to hum after a mileage of about 150,000 kilometers. Before that, they could have been sent for a rebuild due to the destruction of the synchronizers of one of the gears. There are also cases of breakage of the backstage cables. The JR5 gearbox is more technologically advanced and durable, but they are inexpensive to replace and repair. True, in many cases, if there is significant wear, it is advisable to simply replace them with contract ones. The 6-speed TL6 is not subject to bearing wear, but may require replacement of leaking oil seals. DP24 Street Automatic Transmission. If we talk about automatic transmissions, then the only classic hydromechanical transmission was given to the naturally aspirated K4M. We are talking about the old DP2 transmission. Yes, this is a seriously and deeply modernized version of it, but on average it asks for major repairs every 100,000 kilometers. True, it is quite inexpensive to repair. Jatco JF015 2-pedal Megane also had 2 Jatco variators installed. Paired with the 1.6-liter Nissan H4M engine is a JF015 variator. It caused a lot of problems on cars with mileages up to 40,000 kilometers. In this variator, the shaft bearings flied out, and the belt slipped on the pulleys due to sudden starts, when driving onto an obstacle such as a curb. The oil in this variator becomes contaminated quite quickly, including wet products from the pulleys and even the differential, which greatly harms its hydraulic system. In 2015 to 2016, this variator was strengthened and improved. Its service life before failure increased to an average of 150,000 kilometers. JF011. More successful are the CVTs that are available for the 2-liter M4R engine. The old JF011 variator, which appeared in 2005, can live up to 200,000 kilometers. This transmission does not favor either aggressive driving or sluggish driving in traffic jams. Climbing curbs also affects his health, although not so dramatically. And major repairs are unpleasantly expensive. JF016E. In 2012, a slightly more durable and simplified JF016E variator was added to the 2-liter engine. It can travel up to 250,000 kilometers if handled carefully. Robot. DC4 Getrag 6 DCT 256-speed robotic. On the 3rd generation Meganes with a 1.5 DC turbo diesel, the Getrag 6 DCT 250 robotic transmission was available. It took a long time to finish and improve it, but still it just begs to be replaced with conventional mechanics. Still, its consumables such as a gear shift servo and a clutch kit cost $1,000 or even more. The Renault Megane chassis is extremely simple and inexpensive. The original front suspension arms are sold only assembled. The issue price is $130. You can separately buy non-original silent blocks and even a separate ball joint for $15 to $20 to replace them separately. Front stabilizer struts in original packaging cost $35 and last up to 80,000 kilometers. Support bearings for shock absorber struts last up to 200,000 kilometers. The original will cost $50. Original front shock absorbers, $110 each. With high mileage on bad roads, it may be necessary to replace the subframe silent blocks. There are no original silent blocks, but there is a small selection of good substitutes. The steering rack on Meganes can knock quietly for a long time. In principle, a regular repair kit can solve the knocking noise. We will not tire of repeating that the main enemy of the steering rack is moisture that gets into it due to torn steering rod boots. There is literally nothing to break in the rear suspension. The beam is attached to the body through a pair of silent blocks. Perhaps these are the most expensive parts of the Megane chassis. The original will cost $230 a piece, but they serve more than 300,000 kilometers. There are a lot of offers for substitutes. Prices for non-original ones are 4 to 10 times lower. The rear brake discs of the 3rd generation Renault Megane come with built-in wheel bearings, just like the competitor from Peugeot. Therefore, good non-original rear brake discs cost $170 to $230, and for the original they ask for $550. To avoid such expenses and, in addition, to avoid increased wear on the rear brake pads or jamming of the rear wheels, service the brake cables and rear calipers before the frosty seasons. The handbrake here is implemented on the caliper of the main brake mechanism. There are no drums here. The handbrake drive is prone to frostbite. In addition to maintenance and timely replacement of cables with a burst jacket, you can add return springs that will help the lever mechanism release the pads. Original cables cost $30 and can be replaced in half an hour. There will be a lot of conflicting information about the body of the 3rd generation Renault Megane. Let's start with the fact that in the EuroNCAP passive safety tests in 2008, this car crashed with the highest 5 points. Everything is fine with passive safety. The body is also well protected from corrosion. Its panels are galvanized, but the zinc layer is thin. Therefore, those body elements where the paint layer has worn through or been exposed to reagents for a long time begin to rust. Chips and paint may turn red, and more serious rust appears on the door sills. But body parts do not turn into dust for decades. It all starts in their front part. If the owner has not installed mudguards, 7,711,426,788, then dirt and sand wear through the paint and the surface layer of the metal. Before installing the mudguards, it is worth cleaning and painting the worn part of the sills. There is a plastic trim installed on the trunk door, which slowly contacts the door panel at the top and the bumper at the bottom. Paint is rubbed along its perimeter. Usually this is a purely cosmetic problem. It happens that the trunk lid rusts from the inside along its power frame. It's hard not to notice. Rust will stare you in the eye when the door is fully open. If the lights built into the rear door suddenly go out, then look for a broken wire in the corrugation at the transition from the body to the tailgate. On almost all third-generation Meganes, the rear brake light had to be resealed. It is installed at the top of the rear door. Its seal dries out and lets water inside. Drops of water or even streams appear on the rear window from inside the trunk after a car wash or heavy rain. You just need to remove the brake light, get rid of the old seal and glue a new one. Even a universal window seal of the appropriate size will do. At the bottom of the windshield, the Megane 3 has drainage holes covered by flaps. To get to them, you need to remove the plastic frill and the rubber pad on the right side. And on the left, you will have to unscrew the driver's wiper arm. All water and debris from the windshield ends up in the gutter and flows down through two drains. But when debris clogs the rubber valves of the drain holes, water will accumulate and look for another way out. From here, it will enter the cabin air duct, and from there it will flow inside. The result is wet front mats. Owners simply remove the rubber valves from the drains because they literally act as plugs, and clean the drains at the end of autumn or before spring. Remember, in our Renault Duster review we talked about cracks in the paintwork on the rear roof in the gutters. Megane has the same thing. In general, the body of this car is rather weak in torsion, so after the first drives over bumps or after parking on a curb, cracks appear on the rear roof. They spread along the weld seams and affect both the outer layer of paint and the layer of sealant underneath. But don't worry, this doesn't lead to any sad consequences. By the way, it is precisely because of the flexible body that the door seals are imprinted on the paint of the doorways. They say that since 2013, the seals have become softer and leave virtually no imprints. Over time, when opening doors, the limiters, and not only them, begin to click. In the limiters, you can change the bushings that slide along the rod. It is also worth paying attention to the metal around the limiter mounting strip on the body pillar. Often the paint cracks in this area. This is due to the fact that the metal in this place bends in both directions when the door is open, like a disc spring. In the future, everything may end with deep cracks in the steel and tearing out a fragment of metal. To eliminate the weakness of the steel in this place, you have to construct a plate, somehow attach it to the body and then screw the door opening limiter to it. Depending on the region for which the Renault Megane was produced, it may be equipped with a thermal electric heater. The heating element saves you in winter. It heats up the stove radiator, so the supply of warm air does not keep you waiting. This is especially true for cars with diesel engines, which heat up very slowly. It happens that the heating element does not work, but you will not find any errors in the diagnostics. If the heating element is really present in the Megane, then it can be seen above the heater radiator. To do this, you need to remove the central tunnel lining. A relay should be installed on the driver's side, and the heater power wires will be visible on the passenger side. If there is a heating element, then you need to reprogram the car's central switching unit. It happens that data about heating elements is missing in the firmware. By the way, you will have to do the same if you decide to retrofit your Megane with an electric heater. The interior fan of the Megane may turn off due to wear on the electric brushes of its motor. It happens that vigorous tapping of the stove box revives the electric motor. This is a repairable problem. You can simply replace the brushes, but you will have to carefully disassemble the entire assembly and remove the impeller. In general, it's better not to delay this, because then the electric motor armature may burn out. Then you'll have to fork out money for a new fan. The fan may stop working even after starting the engine with a discharged battery. In this case, the fan error will remain in the ECU, and until it is removed, the fan will not start. Depending on the year of manufacture, the Megane 3 has an instrument panel with a dial speedometer, or a combined panel with a digital speedometer. Both panels suffer from burnout of the backlight LEDs. First they start blinking, then go out. Today this problem is solved by resoldering, i.e. installation of new LEDs. Dust also gets under the glass of the instrument panel. To get rid of it, you will have to remove and disassemble the panel, and if the outside temperature sensor begins to show inadequate data, usually underestimated, Then you will need to remove the left mirror cover and replace the thermistor in an NTC B57869S302F143K, the sensitive element of the sensor. The thermistor is sold in radio parts stores. Sometimes a small beautiful bolt is found on the floor at the navigator's feet or behind the plastic upholstery when replacing the cabin filter. This bolt secures the navigator's airbag. To return it to its place, you need to remove the glove compartment, then the airbag mount will be visible. Megane, and indeed many Renaults with manual transmission, are equipped with a clutch damper. It is built into the hydraulic line routed to the release bearing. Over time this damper leaks brake fluid, which is what is used in the clutch circuit. Accordingly, the brake fluid level decreases and the ECU reports a problem with the brakes. The leak can be detected by traces of brake fluid on the left side of the suspension and axle shaft. The tube with damper, 308512092R, cost between $90 and $120. To replace it, you will have to clear the way to the gearbox by removing the battery, its platform and other parts. There is also a popular method. The damper can be removed, opened, and the rubber ring through which the leak occurs can be replaced. The ring will have to be selected according to size. Bleeding the brakes after replacing a ring or damper is mandatory,